week, the last week leading up to Election Day, we've seen several stories emerge that slam home just how corrosive one Supreme Court ruling has been on the firewalls American democracy has relied upon to ensure that our elections cannot be bought by a flood of anonymous millionaires spreading smears and lies against any who stand in the way of them getting more money, the truth and their identities not to see the light of day till it's too late. Our fourth story tonight, what the Supreme Court said would not happen when it opened the doors for unlimited secret spending, has happened when a split Supreme Court issued its ruling in the Citizens United case. Justice Anthony Kennedy justified the ruling by writing, quote, "With the advent of the internet, prompt disclosure of expenditures can provide shareholders and citizens with the information needed to hold corporation and elected officials accountable." What I said at the time was that the Citizens United ruling would change democracy as we knew it. Here's what my next guest, Howard Feynman, said about my assessment then.
I have a confession to make. Sometimes I think you get a little turbocharged, shall we say, about an issue.
Yeah.
I think you're understating this one.
Well, I didn't know where he was going with that. Case in point, though, Karl Rove's group Crossroads pouring more than $1 million into Kentucky into ads that have been refuted by nonpartisan groups in order to defeat Democratic Senate candidate Jack Conway. Where's that million coming from? All we know is that the Crossroads Bank is located not in Washington, but in Lexington, Kentucky. It's a bank run by this man, Terry Forscht, a right-wing millionaire whose many businesses include a nursing home now being prosecuted for covering up the sexual abuse of an 88-year-old resident, prosecuted by the state's attorney general, Jack Conway, who is therefore unable to comment on all this. This is what Citizens United now allows, the pursuit of private agendas, mostly but not exclusively financial, behind the cloak of politics. The biggest such cloak, of course, still belongs to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. What do they want? At their annual summit on tort reform this week, the Chamber called for weaker laws against American companies bribing foreign officials. And President Tom Donahue talked about pushing back against the trial bar, meaning lawyers who represent you against big companies.
In 2008, the trial bar made a significant investment in the election, and they have been working hard to get a return on that investment ever since. The trial bar is looking for a handout to further undermine the economy while lining their own pockets. You can't make that stuff up.
But if you do make that stuff up, you just might get pushback even from your own keynote speaker. Kenneth Feinberg, the 9/11 and BP damages paymaster, who was invited there because of his experience circumventing traditional lawsuits.
I'm a lawyer. I happen to believe that in the run-of-the-mill everyday life in America, the legal system works pretty well. I can also cite examples like 9/11, where the 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund, created by Congress, only succeeded because the trial bar helped.
Coming full circle on this with us, MSNBC political analyst Howard Feynman, senior political editor of the Huffington Post. Good to see you, Howard.
Hi, Keith.
So, of the three of us, who was right? Justice Kennedy, who predicted transparency and thank goodness for the internet and the Googles, me in predicting the end of democracy as we know it, or you for saying I was understating it?
I think we were all wrong. Justice Kennedy for sure. You probably, because we're still here. And
it's only October.
It's only October. And I was wrong, too, because I think what we're seeing now is the beginning of a cycle like what we saw 100 years ago.
Yes.
When the big corporations overplayed their hand, when the McKinley era, they owned the political system lock, stock, and barrel. And eventually a guy from here in New York named Teddy Roosevelt came along and said, these are my people, this is my class, but enough. And I think I have enough faith in our country and in democracy that what's going to happen is that the Roves of the world are going to overplay their hand at some point. This election is not really going to be about this topic, but the next election will.
Of course, to get Teddy Roosevelt into the White House, you had to have a bunch of people who put him in the vice presidency because they thought that's where they could keep him and contain him.
Right.
And unfortunately, an assassination is involved in that equation. Not that we want to ever see another assassination in American politics, but I mean, there are a lot of very strong bulwarks that have been built since this decision that would keep the next Teddy Roosevelt from getting elected president, aren't there? And because of Citizens United?
Well, there may be.
Would you have to be elected and then suddenly say, I'm a trust buster and rip the mask off?
No, I don't think so. As I say, Keith, I think this election season, we're talking a lot about the money, and the money from all places, especially from the Forsts of the world that you're discussing is important. But the American people want to vote on something else this time around. They want to vote on the economy. And they want to vote about their fears for their jobs and their mortgage foreclosures, et cetera. They're not seeing from the beginning the connection between the economic circumstances they're in and the people who are supplying the money for this ad campaign. That conversation really can't happen with 3 weeks left in a midterm election. But I think it's going to be incumbent upon President Obama and such Democrats as are left in the Congress to say, look, let's unpack this a little bit. Let's go back a little bit here and see who's running this conversation, who's controlling the conversation, and what we can really do about it, because it's related to what kind of country we have and what kind of economy we have. It's hard to make that connection unless you start from the beginning of your presidency to do it. And don't forget, Barack Obama said, I'm going to come in, I'm going to change things because I'm me and we're young and we're going to do it. And he took on some of the powers that be, but he didn't really want to be that Rooseveltian kind of guy confronting all the economic powers in America. For whatever reason, he wanted to be the guy who was going to make peace with everybody.
Right.
It's not going to work that way the next time.
8 of the Supreme Court justices in Citizens United said that disclosure laws were vital. It wasn't just Justice Kennedy. Nonprofit groups, secret donors, not supposed to be primarily political in nature. So between that intent and the IRS and the FEC, how can Rove and the Chamber and so on and so forth get away with this even now?
Well, because there's a lot of money involved, number one, and as between the IRS and the FEC, there's a big hole. The IRS looks at these groups from a tax lawyer point of view. Okay, you're in this category, you're a not-for-profit group, fine. The FEC is a wholly owned subsidiary, in my view, of the campaign industry. We're talking about, like most regulatory agencies in Washington, so we're talking about maybe $3 billion in television advertising. They're going to tell $500 million of it that you can't play the game? I don't think so. So what the FEC said was, we're not going to make you disclose the donors to the 501, these particular type of tax-exempt groups, unless the secret money is given specifically for a single ad, which is defining away all regulation of it. So basically they punted. That's the answer to your question.
Howard Fineman of Huffington Post and MSNBC, as always, pleasure to see you, sir.
Thank you, Keith.